and welcome. Raising the Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. Sorry I missed last week. Thanksgiving, of course. I record these on Thursday, so no way that was happening. But I should have told you ahead of time. Apologies for that. Anyway, I'm back now. Heads up, there will be another break around Christmas and New Year's. It doesn't work for me to repost old episodes like other pods do because mine are always about current events. Honestly, I never like it when others do it also. But anyway, I hope you understand. So, how are you doing this week? How are you feeling? It is painfully cold here right now, and you know how I feel about that. This morning it said it feels like 10 below. That is just miserable. All the prep getting out the door, all the layers. It's so cold in the car. Wah, wah, wah. I know. And of course, it's no surprise where we live, but it is colder than normal for this time of year. This kind of cold usually waits for January, February. But anyway, that's not great. Also, Christmas stress is a real thing, right? Just a lot to deal with, a time pressure for all of it. I mean, it's fine. I'm not complaining. Okay, actually, I guess I am. But I do enjoy the season, but it is a bit of an added load. So anyway, plenty to talk about this week. The messy Pete Hegseth nomination, what it says about Republicans in general, some helpful Zen wisdom this week, Apple's amazing new hearing assist features, our challenge of the week, and 2 new product announcements from me. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things are pulling me down? For my ups, the first has to be all the Thanksgiving stuff from last week. I think I mentioned we had a big gathering here. Ended up with 27 or 28 people for dinner. And that sounded like it was going to be crazy to me, but it ended up being great. Not really crazy at all. Felt totally manageable and fun. We had 6 people staying at our house for 2 or 3 nights. All fine and good. And I should credit most of that to Margaret's planning. She's really good at making things like that work. Also, credit to the people who all get along so well. We are exceptionally lucky that way. Our big family, and again, 28 people. Everyone gets along and likes each other. When we get together like that, it's a positive, enriching experience for everyone. Isn't that amazing? It's so rare, based on the stories you hear from others, and we are super aware and grateful for that. We got our Christmas lights up, and those actually make me happy. So all that was good. Another really great thing, I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, that my good friend and the producer of my CDs, I learned that he had a serious cancer diagnosis earlier in the year, and that I couldn't even figure out if he was still with us, which was an extra bummer because I wanted to send him an old guitar, surprise him with that, let him know about my new Essentials record. Well, I finally heard that he is still with us. He's doing well, considering. I had a great call with him. I was able to send him the guitar, and he got it and was thrilled with that. That was just a really profoundly lovely thing, like bucket list kind of fulfilling. Very happy about that. Speaking of my new CD, it is officially out now. I've been telling people about it. I'll tell you more about it later, but that continues to be a very happy thing for me. I also finished the new video I mentioned last time. Talk more about that later too, but I'm super happy with that. Starting to push that out there. And maybe the biggest up this week is that Apple has added a new feature to their AirPods Pro earbuds that has just made a huge difference in my music experience. And it's hard to describe how big a deal this is for me. So I have a pretty significant hearing loss from all those years playing in rock bands. It doesn't affect hearing people talk, so it doesn't officially count as hearing loss, but it does keep me from hearing high-pitched things. Like we have an electronic thermometer that beeps when it's done reading your temperature. I literally can't hear that sound. I have to strain to look at the display to tell when it's done. But the effect this has on my experience of music is pretty profound. I've never heard what my CDs actually sound like. And I can't really judge the mix because I know I'm not hearing the authentic sound, the high end of that. There were 2 different incidents where I was trying to do a mix, and I thought I was putting in just a nice little subtle level of shaker in the background to give it some texture. And when I played it for someone else, they was like, "So what's with the shaker?" It's like the loudest thing in the track. And of course, that shaker sound is up in that high register. so I wasn't hearing it. So anyway, Apple has added this new audio assist feature to their AirPods Pros. First, it can do a hearing test to see what loss you have, and it's the same test you take at the doctor. And then it will adjust the EQ in the pods to compensate for your loss. And the difference is just remarkable. All of a sudden, I'm hearing all those things I've been missing for decades. I finally know what my records actually sound like. And it has just been thrilling. I'm listening to all my old favorites again, loving the difference. And it's funny, my first impulse when I hear something that sounds so great is to play it for others, right? Oh man, you got to hear this, right? But then I remember it's always sounded like that to them. It'd be like me saying, check out how great things look through my new glasses. The change is only for me, or at least the specific change, but it really has just been thrilling all week. Also, it does the same thing for everything else you do on your computer or devices, phone calls, video calls, watching shows. Everything sounds better. And if you do happen to have more profound loss where you might need hearing aids, the pods can now work as clinical grade hearing aids. It's just an amazing thing they added to this, amazing feature they've added. The only bummer is that I got their fanciest headphones last year for Christmas, the AirPods Max, the big over-the-ear style phones. And I've been using those and loving them ever since because they are definitely next level. They just sound fantastic. But now, my little AirPods actually sound better than my Max headphones. For some reason, this new feature isn't available on the Max yet. That really is a bit of a bummer, but I think it's just software, so I'm hopeful they can add that feature to those soon. Anyway, that has been a truly lovely experience this week, and it's a free update. Crazy new feature. For my downs, I mentioned Christmas stress. It's not a huge thing for me. It's not a total humbug by any means. It's just one of those things that adds to your inner load, And that can be on many levels. The time pressure, the what can I get them pressure, I got no ideas. Will they like it pressure, the money and family pressure. It really can be a lot. Again, totally fine, but it's there. Next, I had a pretty classic depressive sort of day yesterday afternoon. Just not feeling great, sort of down. Nothing seemed that interesting or important. I was tired, took a nap. Didn't really want to go play pickleball, which is weird. Didn't really want to do anything. And that's just classic bad chemicals in your system. And it's hard because it reads like so much more, right? Like all those thoughts are the truth. Things really are too much and pointless and, all that negative stuff. But the reality is that it's just brain chemicals. And the way to push through it, at least for me, is first to remember that that's what's going on. Keep reminding yourself that's all it is. And then do something physical to change your chemicals. So I went to pickleball, played well enough, had fun, and in a couple hours the feelings were gone. That's a great thing to remember. Also, sort of a bummer, I mentioned I started back up on Noom a couple weeks ago, working to take off a few pounds again. And that's been going well, though it is a lot of work. But then, of course, Thanksgiving. Knew that was coming, no surprise. But it looks like it cost me about a week, which is more than I expected. And again, sort of a bummer because, again, it's a lot of work. I was actually pretty good with the meal itself this year. Didn't overeat, didn't get too full. The problem is there's leftover pie on the table for a couple days afterwards. And we have family staying with us, so there are more meals to be had, more pie to be eaten. So I ended up slipping back into normal eating mode for a few days and fell behind a bit. It's fine. Back on track now. Just a bit disappointing, right? Bit of a down. All right, that's ups and downs. Next up, top stories. The first thing I want to point out is that my number one story this week is not about Trump, or at least not directly about him. I think it's time to take a new approach with talking about all these issues. And I got a lot of this idea from Dan Pfeiffer, one of the Pod Save America guys. I subscribe to his Substack and find it very helpful. I'll link to that in the notes. Anyway, the problem isn't really about Trump anymore. I mean, it is. At one level, he's still the center of the black hole that's threatening to pull down the entire free world. But the vast majority of bad things that might happen require other Republicans to help at all levels. None of this would be happening if the majority of Republicans weren't over and over again bowing to his wishes, enabling, making excuses, agreeing with him, helping, amplifying, supporting. So it's really time to start taking it directly to them rather than just talking about him all the time. Yes, he wants to do this stupid, terrible thing. No surprise there. The real question is, are you going to let him? Are you going to support that? Is that what you want for your children? Is that what you want your legacy to be? And of course, in a lot of the cases, the answer will be yes. There are plenty of crazy, delusional, dangerous people out there, cult members, who are with him. But we need to call them out and let them know we see what they're doing. We'll resist every way we can and hold them accountable for their choices. So it's not going to be all Trump talk anymore. From now on, it's Republicans. Crazy, backwards, extreme Republicans. Speaking of which, Pete Hegseth, nominee for Secretary of Defense. This guy is just a bad guy, the worst kind of role model. Toxic masculinity defined. Sounds kind of familiar now that I think about it. All bluster, no character, drinks too much, sexually harasses women, demeans women, and of course all this on top of simply not being qualified to run the Defense Department. So Republicans, what will you do about this? Democrats won't support him. Do you? Will you really put this guy in this position? We'll be watching. Kash Patel, nominated for FBI director, election denier, for real, conspiracy theorist, threatening journalists who write bad things about him. Trump wants this guy to be the top law enforcement officer for our country. Republicans, what do you say about that? Over and over again, this will be the question, and we'll be watching what they do. I mentioned last time the trend has been for them to show no core belief in anything other than pure base power. Nothing is disqualifying anymore for these people. Character, ethics, criminal convictions, doesn't matter. They don't respect expertise, science, competence. In many cases, even just basic human decency. It's all just tribe and power. I saw a video this past week from a fairly well-known right-wing media guy. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to amplify him. But he was speaking to men in his audience, and he went on for quite a while to elaborate and make clear this was his belief. He said that our wives, we basically own them. We have dominion over them. They should be thought of and treated like children. They're not our friends or equal partners. In fact, if our wives are our best friends, that just means that we are gay, whether we realize it or not. And he was dead serious about all of that. I honestly couldn't believe it. At any sane time, that person would be shunned from normal society. He would simply not be welcome anywhere beyond some small circle of crazy friends. So, Republicans, where do you stand on that? Do you support those beliefs? Should a person like that have an important position in society? We'll be watching. The other thing I wanted to talk about this week is back on our side, and it has to do with something that happened in the campaign. I actually think this is pretty huge. I'm not hearing much of anything about it. I mean, partly it's old news, but... And so anyway, you probably saw this ad that the Trump campaign was running everywhere. They spent like $65 million running this one ad alone. So it was part of their main message, right, for the last part of the campaign. It was this big podcaster, his name is Charlemagne the God, talking about Kamala's support for using taxpayer funds to pay for gender-altering surgery for inmates in prison. When I first saw that ad, I thought, oh, shit, this is not good. I can see how people would be put off by that. And again, the fact that they were running it so much said they had data, that it worked, that it pushed people away from Kamala. So here's the thing. It wasn't what it appeared to be. It was altered. That guy, Charlemagne the God, was actually a big Kamala supporter. He was a campaign surrogate out there working on her behalf. And that was not his position on that subject. The ad was altered to make it look that way. The actual truth was that he had seen an earlier version of the ad making the same claim, and he was just basically doing what I just did. He was reporting his thoughts and fears about how other people would respond to it. When he says in the ad, hell no, I don't want my taxpayer money to go for that, he wasn't speaking for himself. He was imagining what others would say. So this ad was an intentional deception and twisting of his words. And the Harris campaign didn't push back on that. It reminds me of the swiftboat campaign, if you remember that, against John Kerry in 2004, that was also super effective. The ad was deceiving, that one, it was everywhere, and they also didn't respond directly until it was too late. And it made a real difference. I have generally been super positive about the Harris campaign. I loved the tone they took. I loved everything about it. But when I heard this, it did strike me as potentially an actual mistake that may have made the difference. They should have called this out. They could have potentially turned it around to their favor. But I'm not aware of one single word about it. I only heard about it myself because I heard him, Charlemagne, tell the story on another podcast. He sent a cease and desist letter to the campaign. They ignored it. He thought Kamala would go after it. He expected they would, thought they should. Nothing. Remember, again, this is kind of news to me too, the actual issue, the law they were talking about that allowed taxpayer funds to be used for that, was in effect during the Trump administration. It wasn't anything specific or unique to Kamala or the Democrats or any of that. So they could have turned it against him, but they didn't do anything. I'm not sure of a point to make here. I'm honestly still thinking about what lessons there are in it. I was just sort of shocked to hear about it. Again, this was Trump's main ad in the campaign, and it was a complete misrepresentation. It seems like it shouldn't be allowed, but the only real way to counter it is for the other campaign to call it out, and they didn't do anything. And if they had, it might have made the difference. It ended up, as you probably know, super, super close. Way closer than it originally looked. Anyway, I was really surprised to hear about that. So that is Top Stories for this week. Next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about meditation for the first time on the pod. Hugely helpful skill, really in every way for your inner life. Not only does it help you directly by lowering your stress and bringing more space into your life so you don't have to feel so overwhelmed by things, but it also shows you the mechanism for controlling and mastering your inner game in general. The things you do during a sitting meditation, you start out quiet and present. You notice that you've drifted off into thinking. You gently pull yourself back. That's the exact same mechanism to master your mental game. You're going along, being yourself. You notice a thought or feeling coming up, trying to pull you off track. You say, nope, not going there, and you stay where you want to be. It's the same process. So all your meditation practice helps you also master that core skill for the rest of your life and all the other areas of your life. So I hope you gave that a try. I know you keep doing it at least now and then as part of your self-care routine. It just really is one of the most powerful things you can do. This week, I want to talk again about my favorite Zen story, the one where the two monks are walking. They come across a young maiden who needs help crossing the stream. One picks her up, carries her across. They continue on in silence. Finally, the other monk says, I can't believe you did that. You know we're not allowed to touch women. And the first monk answers, brother, I set her down back there. Why are you still carrying her? Oh, I love that one so much, and in big part because of what it points out about the mental game. And it's on my mind because I had a very similar example of it this week. I was playing pickleball last week, and there was a moment where a guy on the other team called my serve out when it was obviously in. It was a wicked serve, by the way. He had no chance to get to it. But instead of taking that, he called it out. And in pickleball, the team on the side of the ball where it happens gets to make the call. So that was it. And by the way, if you're wondering, it really was in. Everyone else agreed. So that was a bummer. Playing with a guy who's a jerk, made a bad call, 1 point, not the end of the world. But I've been thinking about that ever since. A bunch that night, on the way home, the next day, probably at least once a day since then. And every time I do, it harshes my buzz all over again, right? I get upset again. I get stuck in my head going over it again. It's a real bummer. So here's the interesting point. And this is actually super powerful and important. At some point in this process, the fact that I'm still struggling with it, that it continues to bum me out and pull me off track, just makes me more angry at him, right? It adds to the evidence of him being a terrible person. That's what it feels like, but it's not the reality of what's happening. The actual story is, if I'm upset again, now, many days after the fact, right now, in this moment, he has nothing to do with that. He's not doing it. He's not thinking about me. He's not doing anything, right? The only thing that's happening is that my own mind is bringing up that memory. You see? So if I want to be mad at something for harshing my buzz, for the suffering I'm experiencing, it's not him, it's the voice in my head. That's the real culprit. If it wasn't bringing that up, I'd be fine. None of this upset would be happening. So this was the core insight I talk about in the Raise Your Inner Game book that changed everything for me and started me on this whole path of writing that book in the first place and everything else that's grown from that. In there, when I say I saw the man behind the curtain and realized that's where I should be focusing my attention, that's what I meant. Rather than focusing on the object of my thoughts, in this case, the jerk at pickleball, instead, focus on the source of those thoughts, which is always our negative inner voice. So that's why I wanted to talk about this Zen story again, because it is the perfect illustration of that same observation. The second monk spent the whole time focused on what the first monk had done and being upset about it, not realizing that his real problem was that the thoughts themselves had pulled him into his head and was causing the actual suffering he was feeling. There just isn't anything more on point than that, on the nature of our struggle with our mental game and how to alleviate the suffering it causes. In a very real sense, the negative thoughts that come up like this in our mind are like an evil magic trick. Hey, look over here. This is what's causing you so much trouble. Be mad about this. Hate this thing. When what's really going on is that your mind is just using those things to distract you and keep you from being present and focused and happy. And the more we get that, the less power it has over us. So spend a few moments this week thinking about that story. Again, the two monks, and any examples like it you can think of in your own life. It's a perfect reminder and well worth your time. That's Inner Game Gold for this week. Next up, raise your outer game. This week, I want to share an idea for a way to manage your mood and your energy level. Basically, it's listening to music, but doing it intentionally. This is pretty common with athletes. They'll pick some music, maybe a particular song or album, or put together a playlist that helps them get into their ideal state of mind for competition. Kobe Bryant, the great basketball player, was famous for listening to the theme from the Halloween movie because that character was a ruthless killer, and that's the mindset he wanted during the game. Not crazy about the ruthless killer part, but you get the idea. One thing most athletes don't think about, as far as I know, is to come up with different music to listen to after the game that helps bring them back down from that elevated competition mode into normal life mode. We talk about that in our advanced mental game coaching for athletes. That can be super helpful too. But for the rest of us, we can use this same idea to help us self-regulate, to stay the person we want to be in different situations. When I'm heading to play pickleball, I will sometimes listen to Led Zeppelin because it gets me into a more energized, competitive mindset. On the way home from there, I'll listen to Michael Franks or Andrew Gold or my own record because that helps me chill and not really think about anything and get back into more of a normal state. You could have a playlist for when you're cooking or cleaning or mowing the lawn. You could have one for when you're still pissed about something that happened days ago. There's basically no end to the ways you could use this, and it can be super helpful. Music has an incredibly powerful effect on our emotions and our state of mind. And if you are intentional about it and listen to things that you know put you in a particular sort of place, it can be a really effective self-mastery tool. And just fun too. Listening to music you enjoy is just a lovely, positive experience on its own, and I think for pretty much everyone. Anyway, that's Raise Your Outer Game for this week. Use music to help get you into the place you want to be. Next up, our challenge of the week. This week, let's put together some playlists. Think about a time when you might want some help getting into a certain mental state. Maybe it's your transition from work to home or from home to work. Maybe it's to calm down if you're feeling stressed or anxious. Maybe it's to get pumped up for something that's coming. Whatever it is, next, think about some music that you associate with that feeling. Again, could be a single song or a piece of music, could be an album, could be a collection of songs. So take that music, put it into a playlist, assuming you have a way to do that. I use Apple Music, Spotify can do the same thing. And then see if you can find a time this week to try it out. I have really been enjoying this myself lately. I suspect you will too, and that this will be a helpful addition to your mental game toolkit. All right, next up, highly recommended. I finished the Harlan Coben book, The Innocent. Really good all the way through. He's just a great writer. Definitely recommend pretty much anything he does, and specifically that book. Started a new book this week, also in the spy genre, from a new writer to me, Michael Idov, I-D-O-V. Not sure how to pronounce that. The book is The Collaborators. First impression is he's also very good in much the same way. Good energy. The dialogue feels fresh and real. It's really quite good. Enjoying that about halfway through. For a movie, Margaret and Francis and I rewatched Ocean's 11, the remake with Brad Pitt and George Clooney. That is just a really fun movie. We always like a good caper movie anyway, and this is probably the standard for that in the modern era. It's fun, good twists, lots of handsome people to look at. Just great, mostly light entertainment. That was definitely fun. The big things I want to recommend this week, apologies in advance, are my own new CD and the new video I posted this week. I've been talking about the CD for a while. There's not much to add there. It's called Essentials. It's all my favorite songs from my 4 CDs, 21 tracks in all. There's quite a mix of styles on there. I like that, but that's not for everyone. But these are the songs I am most proud of and most want people to hear if they're interested in that part of my life. And by the way, which songs made it onto the record is not as straightforward as you might think. As a songwriter and performer, there are multiple things going on that you care about. There's the song itself. That's its own skill, writing a good song. There's your performance of it, another distinct skill. And there's the recording of it, which ends up being the most important thing in a lot of ways, and which is also mostly out of your control, interestingly. So for me to be proud of a piece, all 3 of those things need to come together. I have songs that I think are well written, but the arrangement is not great, too long, uneven, just not working somehow. I have other tracks where the recording is good, but I'm not happy with the song anymore. The lyrics don't hold up. And of course, those are the songs that aren't on this new record. So anyway, I'll put links in the notes to that. You can find it on Apple Music and Spotify. My davidlevin.com website also has a music page there, sort of hidden in the links at the bottom with a player you can listen to. If you're interested, check it out. For me, even after all these years and listens, I mean, you can't imagine how many times I've listened to these songs and played these songs. Every one of these tracks still puts a smile on my face. And that's just a lovely thing. The other item is the video I talked about in the last episode. Why everyone is going so crazy and what you can do about it. As I said, this is something I've been working on, or wanting to do anyway, for at least a year now. I think it's genuinely confusing to people to look around the world and see all the crazy things people are doing. It seems like every day now, and you wonder, what is going on? What is wrong with people? So my hope is that it's comforting to have an explanation for that and helpful to have some idea of what can be done about it. So check that out too. I'm super happy with how it came out. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Starting next week, I'm planning to add a new segment called Crazy of the Week to shine a light on this phenomenon. But for now, check out the video. Let me know what you think. And of course, please do share it with others if you think they would find it helpful. I'll mention again the amazing Apple AirPods Pro and their new audio assist feature. Just crazy what that can do. If you have Pros already, super fun. Take the hearing test. It's fun, it's interesting, and if you have any loss, it'll really improve the quality of everything you're listening to. And that is it for this week. Remember, with the holiday stress and everything else coming in the new year, we're going to need all the self-regulation skills we can get to stay above it and continue to be the person we want to be. So if you haven't read Raise Your Inner Game yet or taken a sports academy training if you're an athlete, now is a great time. It's also a great gift to yourself or really anyone else you think would enjoy a little help in this area. It truly is the gift that keeps on giving. Check out raiseyourinnergame.com for more on that. Otherwise, thank you as always. Let me know if you have any questions. Keep up the good work. I will talk to you next time.